Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "You Can't Park There, I Won't Be Safe." This story is about a power-hungry Hoah president. We will call her Helen. So a little background about my neighborhood. It's basically a long street with a cul-de-sac at the end. Helen lives in one of the 4 houses that encircle the cul-de-sac. So a few years ago, Helen proposed at our monthly Hoah meeting that our street is too narrow for emergency vehicles like fire trucks or ambulances to fit through, and she's worried that they won't be able to reach the cul-de-sac houses in an emergency. Which is bullcrap. It's not a through road, so only residents of this small street ever need to use it. Sure, it can be a little tight at times, but 2-lane traffic moves comfortably, and it rarely ever needs to because it's a quiet neighborhood street with not much traffic. Fire trucks can and have been accessing the cul-de-sac since the beginning of time. But Helen was on a power trip and she wanted to have one side of the street curb painted yellow to restrict the parallel parking on the street. This move was heavily opposed because it would significantly limit street parking in our neighborhood. Plenty of people raised concerns that there wouldn't be enough parking and this would affect the value of their homes. And since the street parking was first come first serve, it would create undue competition between neighbors in securing a parking spot on our street. But Helen pushed back, saying that safety was more important, being able to find a parking spot. She said there's always plenty of room to park on the cul-de-sac if need be. It shouldn't be an issue. And after much deliberation, we put it to a vote and the motion did not pass. The highly unpopular curb painting would not be happening. Or so we thought. Helen went to the fire department a few days later and voiced her concerns. She told them the neighborhood residents had her support in painting the curb. And on a Monday afternoon, while everyone was at work, they painted the curb yellow. We all came back home that evening to find that our available parking options had been cut in half. People were livid. One neighbor in particular was having none of it. You see, he owned a small boat which he typically kept parked on the street. But now that parking was significantly reduced, he decided he would find a better place for his boat. He waited for Helen to leave for work the next day and parked it right in front of her house on the cul-de-sac, per her suggestion. The look on her face when she came home to find her usual parking space taken over by a boat was almost worth the whole ordeal. And since he rarely ever took his boat out, it stays parked there in front of her house pretty much year-round. At the next Hoah election, she was voted out. The next president got the curb painted back to normal, but boat guy still parks his boat in front of Helen's house. All is good in the world. The next one is titled, "Absolutely Mr. Neighbor." I have a neighbor who is a bit of a troublemaker. A bit of a backstory: he has 4 cars and often parks them all on the street, completely filling the street in front of his and my house. When he isn't working on his car with air wrenches or washing them, he is probably idling his tow truck. Oh yeah, he has a tow truck too, just rumbling away outside of my house. People are constantly coming and going from his house, likely for illicit reasons, but no way to prove that. There was a period where the police were at his house multiple times a week about 2 years ago, but that has subsided to once every couple months. He lives with his grandmother, who is immobile, and you no longer see her anymore except when the ambulance comes and takes her to the hospital, alone. Last week when I was walking out of my house to take my son to daycare, he came stomping across the street and started to be all buddy-buddy with me, so I immediately knew something was up. He asked if we can keep my dog, a German Shepherd, inside in the morning until 7 a.m. because he is tired of her waking him up. She is a shepherd, she barks, we limit it as best we can, but a dog is going to dog. I say sure, and continue buckling in my kid. He then continues on and says to not take pictures of him or his house. I point to the camera overhead, which is oriented in a way to see my front door, driveway, and his house. I put it up to keep an eye on him and my property since he has a hot head and I don't trust him to not do something stupid. Then to take the cake, he told me to stop following his wife, and explained that she said I followed her home multiple times. I explained to him that I lived across the street, from time to time we will both be coming home at the same time, and that I have better things to do than park a mile away from home to follow her home. So, for the malicious compliance, it comes back to keeping my dog inside until 7 AM so he can get his much-needed beauty sleep. Now, instead of leaving her dog door unlocked at night, and her going out in the morning when she wakes up, usually around when we wake up at 6:30 AM, we lock it at night and unlock it on the nose at 7 AM. But, at 7 AM when I let her out, I tell her to speak for about 5 minutes. More often than not she'd go out in the morning pee, and come back in with no one any the wiser. Not anymore, now she goes out and barks up a storm for a few minutes. The next one is titled, FHOA, Malicious Compliance. So, I live in a still being built subdivision that has an Hoah that was put together by the developer. Once all the houses are finished, we're going to start our own Hoah, and most of the people in the neighborhood are pretty on board with basic rules and nothing too outlandish. Have whatever mailbox you want as long as it's legal. However, we currently are living under the shadow of the developer's Hoah. One of their rules is that we aren't allowed to park a vehicle in our driveway for greater than 72 hours. The residents think it's a stupid idea, and most of us have decided that one's going away and we're going to institute the has to run rule. We're adults here. As it turns out, I was going to Philadelphia for a conference the second week of January. We have a 3-car garage. One of the slots is my wife's car, one is our motorcycles, and the furthest is my pickup. However, we were reorganizing our Christmas decorations and we had my slot taken up by the boxes and totes. My truck was parked in the driveway for an entire week. Flash forward to 2 weeks ago, I get a note on my door saying I owe the builder, not an Hoah, $1,000, $200 for every night my truck was parked in the driveway, not moving, for 5 days. I'm a little uppity about this. I contact one of my neighbors who has a car he regularly keeps in the driveway and ask him if he's ever gotten one of these. He tells me that when he bought his house, there wasn't Hoah paperwork, there was a neighborhood agreement. I went back, grabbed my paperwork and compared it to his, then to another neighbor's, then another's. Turns out, we were the only ones who'd signed this agreement, and it hadn't even existed outside of that. Our sales agent had sold us our house, then died, RIP, and was replaced by eventually 3 other people. I contacted my lawyer, who asked if there was any proof that the truck hadn't moved. Not that I knew of. Then he asked who would be 1. Reporting this, and 2. Who would be benefiting from it. We currently have one of the builder's sales agents living in another cul-de-sac around the bend, albeit she sells for a different neighborhood. She's the only person in the entire neighborhood who hasn't joined in on any of our get-togethers, the organizing ones or they're just hanging out in the summer ones. She drives a mid-O Accord. On my security camera, I see her Accord every day swinging by our cul-de-sac. Every day, just about the same time, when she's done with work and comes home. She'll patrol, slowly, around the neighborhood. I contact my lawyer and let him know. He writes a beautiful letter, telling the builder that, according to the county where I live, Hoah rule violations need to be paid to an Hoah, not a builder. That the document that I signed doesn't say I need to pay the builder, so I will therefore be paying the Hoah, which doesn't exist, $1,000 for use in improving the neighborhood. He also writes a beautiful letter asking the builder to cease sending harassing entities into the neighborhood. In other words, she can't call out anything she sees on me, because I'm the only one they can nail. I got on the Facebook page for my neighborhood and asked them what the best way for me to spend my $1,000 would be. 15 of them joined in with some money, and were buying a floating gazebo for one of our green spaces. The next one is titled, Up to 4 days means up to 4 days. I work in a small shop that fixes computers for people. This woman came in on a Tuesday and asked for us to fix her laptop. Sure, no problem. Took a brief look at it to assess what is a likely fault, probably a case of replacing the hard drive and reinstalling Windows. So I quoted her up to 4 working days to be completed, as we usually work on things in the order they come in. She agrees to this and did not pay for the fast service we offer, which would probably have been next day in this case. Anyway, come Thursday she comes in expecting her laptop to be fixed. I tell her I'll check if it's been done yet. Having a look, I find it's still on the shelf, but it's next in the queue to be looked at, so I tell her this. At this point she goes ducking ballistic, saying that she needs it fixed to do her self-employed job and that she cannot do work without it. I tell her if she wanted it done urgently she should have brought it in on a fast service, but I can upgrade it right now and get it would be done either by the end of the day or tomorrow morning. She storms off saying she isn't paying anything extra. Alright, not paying any extra, I suppose that means she wants the standard speed then. I started working on it later that day but then left it in a corner because I wanted it to be dry to take it outside and clean out the CPU fan. It was filthy. I timed it so that we notified her it was completed about 30 minutes before closing on the 4th working day, Monday, complying with what was agreed. Despite the laptop was basically completed around Friday lunchtime. She couldn't get in before we closed, what a shame, and then picked it up on Tuesday, a full week after she brought it in. I met my end of the agreement to the letter. Customers who don't complain and shout at me usually get it done faster than agreed. Had one recently where I am supposed to quote him about 3 days, but as he was nice and we had a friendly chat for a while, I told him come back in 30 minutes as it was a model I was very familiar with and knew I could do it there and then. The next one is titled, Pull Me Out of the Shower Stark Naked to Belittle Me? Okay, but it's gotta be in front of everyone. So my stepdad has always been a very nitpicky person. He has the eyes of a hawk, jumping at every misplaced spoon or crumb as an opportunity to call me downstairs and go on a diatribe about cleanliness and picking things up after myself. If I don't show up, that makes it worse, as I would have to sit tight for 20 minutes as he rants and raves about respect. My brother relishes the opportunity to witness stepdad chewing me out, happily conveying the court summons upstairs with a big smirk on his face. I wanted to teach both of them a lesson about being petty, and waited for my chance. One day, we had guests over that were staying pretty late. After eating dinner, I went up to quickly shower so I could enjoy the evening activities without having to take up the bathroom later. I must have left a spoon or plate sitting outside its place, because as per usual, my stepdad asks for me to come down. My brother jumps at the opportunity to watch me suffer, shooting upstairs and hauling me out of the shower cold and dripping, rubbing in my face that I have to come down. So I complied. Sopping wet, and with soap suds sliding down my bare body, I made my way downstairs in ripping nudity. My stepdad and brother were there, the smug expressions wiped off their faces as I went on full display in front of everyone. I told them I was hassled down here and that it was urgent, asking what was the matter. My stepdad stammered that I had left a spoon on the table, as the guests stared at him and me in utter shock. They didn't stay much longer. After that embarrassment, my stepdad and brother magically stopped hassling me, I guess learning to live and let live. I didn't get any more urgent calls from downstairs. Edit, just to set the record straight, I wasn't physically pulled out of the shower, my brother just banged on the door until I cracked it open and told me I'd get chewed out if I didn't go downstairs immediately. My family gets along, but you know how pettiness works, especially after 6 months of lockdown. Edit 2, sigh to everyone asking. Yes, I'm male and I have an endowment. You can imagine the effect. The next one is titled, No, You're Not Out, But. I saw a paintball story on here earlier that made me realize my favorite paintball story might count as MC. So, important background, when they did their standard explaining the rules of the field, one of them was, you have to be hit by an intact paintball that breaks on you to be out. So, if a paintball glances off of you and doesn't break, you're not out. If a paintball hits something else besides you, and you get hit by a splatter, you're not out. Pretty simple. The field we were playing on was largely open with a number of wooden barriers. One quadrant of it was sort of a loose hedge maze. It was very early in the season, and the hedges were just plain branches, no leaves or anything. Not that I know a thing about plants, I don't know what they'd look like or how thick they'd be at their best. One of the players on the other team had a semi-bright idea, and he managed to force his way inside one of the hedges, keeping him surrounded on all sides by it. Maybe 6 to 12 inches protected him from the front and back. He could see out, more or less, and he shoved his gun through to stick out and tried to shoot us from there. I was holding a position at the top of a hill overlooking this, and I'd see our guys take a few shots at him, but the balls would break up without hitting him with a clean paintball break, as that above rule said. He'd shout out that they didn't count, naturally. He wasn't occupying a very important spot on the field, and he wasn't much of a threat, as the branches kept him from moving his gun around very efficiently, so the people I saw that failed to kill him just moved away to go find someone else. He was laughing his butt off at his own brilliance, gleefully shouting out to everyone that tried, that doesn't count, that doesn't count. Then, the reason that I'm posting this, I had an idea. I got to the closest cover near him, a waist-high wooden barricade, and had no real trouble keeping safe while taking my own shots at him. As I mentioned, his gun being jammed inside the hedge kept him from having any real ability to aim whatsoever, so, since I could take my time, I methodically put maybe 40 to 50 rounds aimed directly for his mask. Now, depending on the exact design of a paintball mask, if you take a lucky hit on the breathing vents, you might end up tasting a hint of paint. If you take dozens and dozens of hits that are bursting inches before those vents. I just kept firing, yelling at him, "These don't count. You're still in. These don't count." Until he forced his way out, gun high in the air, which is the sign for, "Don't shoot me, I'm out," took his mask off long before getting off the field, which is generally not something you do before you're totally off the field, and spit out paint the whole way off, with the bottom half of his face completely soaked. I very much complied with the rules and agreed with him the whole way though, none of my shots counted, he just chose to quit of his own free will. The next one is titled, "You expect them to be delivered as you would with anyone else?" Sure thing, buddy. So I recently started working at a new job at a Canadian retail company that has online services. My job is mainly to pick items that were ordered online from the store aisles or from our warehouse, arrange for them to be picked up, and have them ready to go by a set time every day. We average about 5 to 6 items per day, most going to places that are between a half-hour to a 2-hour drive distance, depending on the direction it goes, as other retail stores can cover the same area better than we can. Now I live in a smallish city and the company that picks up the online purchases, with a lack of a local terminal, has to go to the capital city to their sorting site before traveling to their destination. This means a minimum of 2 days before it gets to a customer, but could be up to a week depending on delays. So we reach out and try to convince customers who live locally to pick up their purchases. Usually, once they realize that it would take 20 minutes to get their item and without charging the extra cost of delivery, most are willing to pick their items up. Now, of course, there are exceptions. I'm not talking about the elderly and physically disabled who cannot make such a trip. We implemented at our store a delivery exemption initiative for these people. We deliver it to them for free. No, we are talking about this one customer. He lives literally down the street from the store. As in a 3-minute drive down the street. As in, we have employees who walk past his house. And he ordered not 1, not 2, but 3 items. Put just over $500 on his credit card for this, and wanted them shipped out to him via the delivery company. We saw immediately that it would cost him almost half on top of what he is paying for the items to ship these. I forgot to mention that all postage is paid by the customer. So I called the customer, explaining where his purchases were coming from, the extra cost and time of delivering these through the company, and that he could save both if he came to pick up the items he ordered. His response, "I have ordered these online and I expect that they will be sent." I clearly tried to explain that his items were coming from down the street, not from a store elsewhere in the province. His response, "I don't care where they come from. I expect my online order to be delivered as you would with anyone else." Okay. Will do. Cue malicious compliance. After hanging up, we did as asked. I let the manager know about this order and his instructions, which he laughs at and shrugs his shoulders. We picked his items, scheduled delivery for said items, had all 3 picked up. The delivery guy looks at the delivery address, looks at me and gives me a "what the hell" look. I explain that he wanted it shipped like all other online deliveries. He laughs, shakes his head, and takes the items. So the next couple days I track the order as it travels over 2 hours to the sorting facility, stays overnight, is on the truck for delivery and finally is signed by the guy. Not an hour later he's at the store, demanding the cost of his delivery back. The manager explains that we tried to help him but, in his own words, shipped his online order as we would as anything else. Side note, when a customer orders an item online, they are offered a regular and an express option. Express is much faster but has a higher charge than regular deliveries. Depending on the size and weight, it can cost anywhere from 50% to 200% more for express delivery. He chose Express as his option, and we obliged. And his items were on the heavy end of the spectrum. I have offered again the deal I proposed at the start, but for some reason, they are against it. Would have made everyone's life a lot easier since they pay me the same for the same amount of work anyway. The last one is titled, "You want a drink every time I pass your table?" I'm going to pass your table as much as possible. I work at an independent fine dining Italian restaurant outside of Chicago. The other night, I served a table of 14 people at my restaurant. They were all the most terrible people I have ever come in contact with. One guy sits down and orders an adult beverage. He says, "Every time you come to the table I want you to have one waiting for me." I thought he was probably just joking, so I leave and come back and he says, "Where is my drink? Did you really forget? I told you like 2 minutes ago?" Wow. So I said, "Oh. I am so sorry, it won't happen again." So, for the next 2 hours, no matter what, every single time I approached the table I left a drink. After about 45 minutes the bottles began to pile up. The jerk's friend tried to take one that I put down, but I grabbed it and said, "Sorry sir, this is your friend's beverage. I would be happy to get one for you if you like." Every time I put a beer down he said nothing. If he would have acknowledged my presence and told me to stop I would have. He said nothing. I started to feel bad, for a couple of minutes, and then he yelled at me like a dog to get the food out faster. That is what he wanted. I just want to reiterate that. He asked for it. Also, I was watching him drink. If at any point his behavior, consumption increased I would have stopped. He walked out the exact same way he walked in. Like a douchebag. Long story short, he ended up buying 25 drinks at $8 a pop with a 20% mandatory auto-grat on the table. He, maybe, drank 4. I have never felt so good in my life. It doesn't pay to be an arrogant butt, folks. This was a crowning achievement in my 7 years of serving. I work at a place where some people come in and treat me like a piece of stew meat, and I have learned to play the game in order to make money. I love my job and the people I meet, but I get stepped on a lot. It's nice to win one. Thanks for listening.